while last video there wasn't a whole lot going on. It was pretty slow 2 weeks prior. This past week I got to chipping away at a couple of game projects and got through some other stuff, started up some new things. Got a lot of long-term stuff going on currently with gaming. Really still about to close out Unicorn Overlord soon, finally, after almost 80 hours. I'm probably gonna clock in close to 100 if I'm looking to do what I want to do in that, which is try to expand my army as much as I can and do as many things on the map as I can in the first playthrough. I did get through a couple of things, but the most fresh on my mind currently is ZZZ, Zenless Zone Zero, MiHoYo's next foray into this classification of gacha games that I think is very unique to what they've been able to do for the past couple of years, which is create a AAA product, essentially, that is free to play, but its monetization scheme is that of gacha gambling, the gamba. Pick up waifus with poles, be enticed with more of them on banners, and hopefully they can make a whale out of you, right? Most cases with MiHoYo, I never put any money into them. I've always been attracted to them from the onset, from like box art or from initial character interactions, and it's no different here. You know, back in Genshin Impact, Amber sold me on the game, and then you start playing the game and not even 2 hours in, she's already in your party. So the incentive really to pull was not ever there for me, other than like, oh, Amber is she's kind of weak. But besides that, I should mention, at this point in time, I've reached Internaut level 30 in game. I've gotten past basically all of the guaranteed pulls that you'd get from release that they've been advertising, the 180 pulls, which is like not entirely true. It's more like you can get 100 pulls for like characters or W engines, and then 80 pulls of Bangboos, which are these little fuckheads. I've been able to do all those, as well as getting up to the chapter 2 intermission leading into chapter 3. That's where I'm at currently. I just met a couple of public security officer characters that may or may not be playable soon enough. Who is to say? This is what this game is. The essence of this game is essentially built upon the upbringing of millennials that were born and raised from the 90s into the early 2000s, with just a small hint of casual character action. So think of the most latest Devil May Cry mobile game. Hold. I know peak of combat is not necessarily peak in any way, shape, or form. But look, y'all, this was probably the more fun gacha game I've experienced. Most of them very light on gameplay. Open world settings aren't actually all that interesting to explore. They're kind of very barren, very one-dimensional, very Skyrim-esque, you would say, and not nearly as dense or intricately designed with the subsystems like a Breath of the Wild or anything like that. The Genshin Impact open world is now, from what I've heard now, it's just too big. And I thought already back in release, like, the open world was pretty big with a lot of barren wastelands there, even though it was very lush and colorful. This game does away with that. It goes straight into the action, and it's simple enough. People call it a left-click spam fest. I wouldn't go so far as to call it that, because most of the time characters have unique combos that you won't be able to gain access to if you are only spamming left click. You know, using some of Anby's signature, or I guess optimal damage, requires you to have at least one. It's mostly just one button press timing at the end of her 4-hit combo that you need to do to get the extra lightning damage. But like, it's not a spam fest. And also, once you get to the later levels in the game, at this point where I'm at, and a lot of the challenge mode stuff, that requires a lot more timing on your button presses, because it's not just left click. There's, you know, your basic attack, There's also a built-in dodge that you have for your character. There's also the space bar, because I'm playing on mouse and keyboard, which is the defense assist, where it's basically like an instant tag out into your other character. Your team is built up of 3 characters. The first 3 you have are Anby, the almost emotionless, almost android-esque kind of girl with white hair. There's Billy the Kid, who is just a gunslinging robot, cyborg. And then there's Nicole, who's she's the bait. Let's be real, she's bait for people like me. She fits the criteria, we'll say that. So in this case, back to Peak of Combat. You know, that game, a lot of it is very similar in many aspects to this game, especially with the way different characters play. Some of them have timed button presses to deal more damage with their basic combos. Others, you have to hold the button down to get better damage on their combos. Some of them you have to like do a specific dash input command to be able to get into their more specialties, like whatever sort of elemental attacks they've got. Everybody's special attacks can work differently. Some of them are just straight up projectiles. Other people is like a mode that you can activate where it'll trigger new combat attack combos with the special on. But the main point I want to make is that this is like a high budget game. This is very much a high budget. It has some of the most varied character designs I've seen in a MiHoYo game to date. Now, let's step back for a bit, right? We know Honkai Star Rail is there. Honkai Star Rail has, I don't know if it has almost as many characters as Genshin now, but the different types of characters you can meet in that game is an absurd amount. There are so many different varieties of characters in there, but I think they all kind of boil down to one simple thing, and that's appealing. You know, most of them are very appealing, sleek, polished, and they've got the same attitude as most other Genshin characters too, where they're petite or they're long and lean, but like they're supposed to attract your eye's attention immediately. In this game, there's a lot more variety with the way the characters are designed. You got fucking Ben Bigger over here, who's just Kuma with a chain. And then you also have Billy the Kid, who's a cyborg, just fully robotic body. And you've got people like Nicole. You got Ellen, the shark maid. Like, what the fuck? And then you have an actual person who's just blue, but is not a maid or a shark, but they're blue. There's just a blue chick that's there. I don't know what the lore is behind that. Don't ask me. Maybe the game will tell me, because the game is a serious yapathon. If there's one thing I can say about it that I'm not completely sold on just yet, even though the world building in this currently is very well paced, the stakes of the current story are not catastrophic or like to biblical proportions that you would expect from a JRPG or most other things of this nature. It's very at home kind of ilk. It's very local to wherever the game is currently taking place in, if you get what I mean. Like, wherever you are currently in the game, that's where the story is taking place, and that's about the extent of like the gravitas of the story and the situations at hand. You're dealing with the characters personally. You are learning more about them and their personalities. They are developing through their relationship with you as you're progressing through the story. But there's just a lot of yapping, my guy. There's just so much yapping in this shit, man. It's absurd. I remember at one point, I walk out of my room during an immersive storytelling section to go to one side of the house to do something. Come back, sit down. I'm like, all right, more story to catch. And then something else comes up in the house, so I have to get up, leave the room, and go to the opposite side of the house again from where I was before. And I was there for even a little longer than last time. I came back into my room, couldn't have been less than 20 minutes me being out, and they were still talking. It was absolutely insane. I probably missed some context, but it really wasn't that hard to get an idea of like what was happening in the story afterwards, because then they would talk about the repercussions of what just transpired that I may or may not have missed. So at that point, at the very least, the game at least can still loop you in a very convenient manner because of the pacing of it. We're not going fucking out of bounds with this shit just yet. We're not reaching godhood at this point in the game. We are proxy hackers doing stuff under the guise of local governments or federal governments. We're doing shit illegally while we're running a video store legally on this hipster street, essentially, we'll call it that. But I'm down with it. I'm not much of a hipster usually, but I mean, this kind of just fits my vibes, really. The VHS tapes, the music, the character designs, Nicole. Anyway, what else do I want to bring up? Through progressing through the game, I had this strange feeling that even though I had been able to rank up my reputation at some point with a rank up request, and that allowed me to increase the cap for my characters to 30. A lot of the times I had everybody already at level 20, and most missions by that point were already like level 24 to level 28 enemies that you would be coming across and coming into contact with. So most of the times I was under leveled during that point. So to me, it feels like even though level 20 is the first cap that you get to, that like you don't need to do anything special to get to level 20 for your characters, it felt like a very arbitrary sort of gatekeep to the rest of the content that's even this early in the game. We're talking, you know, by Internet level 30, I must have put in, what, 30 hours at most, I would say, right? I started last week on Wednesday, and I played up until yesterday, basically all the time. So that's probably more than 30 hours, to be real with you. So I don't know. I haven't been keeping count of how much I've been playing, but there was one stream that I did that was just over 8 hours of me playing. So, you know, go figure, I guess. But anyway, level 20 feels very arbitrary. I feel like there's not enough content that revolves around being at that cap. I'd say even the actual promotion, the actual rank up mission that you have to do to get level 30 cap is, I'm pretty sure that's above level 20 too. And if it isn't, then that's my bad. But even then, like by that point, you still probably might not have the rank up materials you need to be able to promote them to level 30 by this point for all your characters. So to me, there's just not enough at level 20 to kind of make it feel like it should be there for an actual purpose, other than to just keep you from getting to level 30, which is where everything else kind of levels out for the content itself. Like there's a lot more level 24 to 28 to 30 content than there was like level 16 to 20. Prior to that, it was like if you had your guys capped at level 10, you were probably screwed, because there isn't even that much level 10 content either at that point. Maybe the game assumes that like I'm going at a fast pace and that I don't need to stay at level 10 for that long, but I'm pretty stingy with these fucking gacha games. Like, you know, they'll take any money they can from you in whatever means necessary, with the amount of currencies they try to throw at you, or the amount of systems that they use, which is just over glorified leveling up systems instead of just one concise screen with like a skill tree or something. No, it's like systems within systems within systems that like, it might not affect the way the game aesthetically looks, but it'll affect like your character's damage, the amount of damage they can take, their health, things that would be very minimal on screen to show. And You get a lot of that too with the traversing during missions. Traversing is set on this tile map with televisions on it, and it's not cool like Persona 4. It's kind of lame. It's also really slow paced. That's also something that I would call it a glorified slow paced tile based RPG. And most importantly, they try to implement puzzle elements to the traversal, but in most cases it was very weak, not good puzzles in these things. They're usually very uninteresting and they kind of solve themselves. Like, you can't even mess up most of them. The only exception to that are the puzzle missions that you do, where you have to carry a conveyor belt through a specific tile map to not only grab all of the to not only deliver all of the sedatives to people who needed them, that needed rescuing on the map, but you also could you could also solve it in a way that you can collect all of the currency items that are along the path in one go. And that, to me, that's more interesting. Those are interesting puzzles where, like, you could mess up, and if you mess up, you're probably not gonna get a good grade on the mission. I need more of those. Even the Bangboo puzzles, like for fixing Bangboos that are in the overworld, in the free roam areas, those Bangboo puzzles are just not that good. They're just very dumbed down. Marvel Spider-Man, click the thing to rotate them to create a line of current puzzles. They're just very lackluster, not great. But I'll tell you what is great is that this game tries to take a lot of inspirations from things that came before it and during the time period that it's trying to portray. Anime references, video game references. God, Billy the Kid literally has the only most obscure reference in 2024 that I've seen to Tales of Symphonia, where on the character select screen he goes, "Don't worry, I got double the guns. That means double the accuracy." And I just couldn't help but facepalm at that when I heard him say that. I was like, oh my god, ain't no way they just referenced Lloyd from Tales of Symphonia. Like, what the fuck? But that's why Billy stays on the team, though, because, double the guns, double the accuracy, But aside from that, they implement this day-night cycle where certain activities are open and available to you depending on the time of day that is currently going on within the free roam areas of the game. And as long as you're not in the immersive storytelling mode, then the passage of time will go at your pace depending on what activities you do. And to that end, it reminds me of Persona, which I think is cool, but it feels like it's sort of ham-fisted in there just so that it can be cool. It feels like it's taking a lot from those sorts of games in that time period, and it feels like the Persona day-night cycle is just implemented in this way just so that they have an excuse to kind of call this slice of life, much like Persona. But there's no time limit to all the stuff that you do. It's just at different times of day, different things will occur in the free roam areas. And that's about it. It helps them pace out the story, right? It gives you an idea of like the passage of time when you're in immersive storytelling mode. That it's like, okay, them trying to accomplish this mission currently in the story is taking them 2 to 3 days to do, with a lot of back and forth between characters, a lot of backstory going on, more background information, plot, lore between different characters, how one character is in the midst of doing this one thing or trying to find this one specific item that they're looking for in the world, and how we are getting caught up in all of that stuff. In that sense, the day-night cycle makes sense, but in most other cases, interacting with the other content, I feel like it just kind of feels like it's padding, sort of, but it's not to the worst extent. It's just sort of like, okay, I get why you did this, but did you have to do this? Like, it feels very video gamey, whereas in Persona, it's very intentional. The day-night cycle occurs because there's a limited amount of time in the school year that you have to, get to reach your goals and, socialize with people in those games, along with the characters that you start out with, pulling for characters, at least currently with the game on release, it doesn't feel too, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't feel too much, it doesn't feel too scammy. I know most MiHoYo games are not inherently scams, right? They do bundle that stuff up in a bunch of content within each of their games. But sometimes the pull chances, the amount of times you can get pull chances, the things that you have to do, the monetization can seem kind of scummy, probably more scummy than scammy, especially with Genshin nowadays. Oof, God, that's in the dumps. That's in the dumpster right there, man. That game, I don't know how that game comes back from whatever BS they've been pulling with that game. But so far, this game, the way it starts out, the 180 pulls it seems deceiving. But when you see the effect, having a full party with leveled up to a certain extent with specific gear and a good Bangboo to match up with your team composition, when you see that stuff get put into play within the gameplay itself, with how much harder things are getting now for me, I can see why they would try and advertise it as 180 free pulls. But they've split the Bangboo signal search from the normal character signal search now. Essentially, just the Bangboo has its own currency and banner that you pull from that is different from the currency you use to pull characters and the gear that you get for them. So at least with that, I can appreciate that. They separated them, because I figured they knew that if you put both of them together, then you'll get an S rank when you're trying to pull for a character, but then it turns out just to be a Bangboo. And you only see Bangboos in very specific situations while you're in combat. If you time it just right to get them off of an assist attack, a quick assist attack, or a defensive assist chain attack, or mostly chain attacks, really, not none of the other stuff. Getting them in chain attacks is sort of imperative to being able to see the Bangboo do something active in the combat. But that's about the only case really for him. What else to say? The music slaps, by the way. I feel like I might have brought this up earlier, but I just want to reinstate this and kind of focus. The music is really good in this game. There's a lot of different styles of music. They cover a wide foray of genres. It's a huge umbrella that lives underneath Zenless Zone Zero currently, of just how much pop culture they're covering, how much music they're covering, and playstyles too, I'd say, even. Because even then, even though you're left clicking a lot of the time, Billy the Kid, usually he's probably going to be up in the back just shooting his guns. Whereas with Ambi, you're going to be wanting to do your 1, 2, 3 delay hit combo, Or with Nicole, you're going to want to make sure that you have her ammo reloaded at all times so that she can do maximum damage with her basic combos and stuff like that. And she can also trap people in her black hole sort of looking ability, where it'll suck them in and deal damage. You can get an assist attack straight from there because they're stuck in that. Enemies that get stuck in there, they're susceptible to getting just hit for free. They can't get out of that. So stuff like that is really cool. And I gotta say, props mechanically to how defense assists work and how perfect dodging works, where if you push your basic attack after doing a defense assist or a perfect dodge, doing a basic attack in that will initiate a fully invincible attack. That's smart for a game like this, because you just want to look cool and do this stuff casually, really, right? You don't want this game to get too complicated with how you want to time your button presses or your perfect dodges to get the right amount of damage. You kind of want it to be rewarding for as soon as you get it. As soon as you get that timing down just right for a defense assist or a perfect dodge, you want to be rewarded right away if you go for an attack. You know, you want the counter attack to feel good. So even if the enemy might go for another attack afterwards, the fact that you get invincibility on stuff like that, and for most people's special attacks and EX special attacks, I think that helps with making people integrate more into the way the gameplay works, because it's very easy to get hit out of basic combos and basic special attacks, but to incentivize people to use the meter that you get while you're playing by making them fully invincible and not be able to get hit out of those attacks, that helps with getting people into the game more on a casual sense, because then you're always looking to go for the cool shit. You're always going to be wanting to learn how to, you know, time your button presses just right to deflect all the damage that could be given to you and counteract with your own bulk amount of damage. And I feel like in a game like this, it works well. Just don't do this don't do this sort of thing in an actual tag fighter, because I can imagine there's going to be a lot of prospective developers out there that are going to play this game and think the assist system and the perfect dodging is really cool, and will think, I could do this in X game type. And if you do this in a fucking tag fighter like MVC, having fully invincible tag out combos would be kind of ridiculous. I don't know. There's already assists in MVC 3 that are fully invincible, and they're kind of BS to deal with. So I would say don't look too deep into this part if you're making a tag fighter or any other traditional fighter that requires tagging in assists and whatnot. Don't do that. It's good here, just don't do it there. Don't ask me why I had to bring that up. It was just a thought that I had while I was making notes for this video. This is the first time in a very long time that I've made notes for a video. By a long time, I mean like since probably since before my Armored Core video. This is like, that was the last time I made notes for a video talking about games. Which leads me to say, that wasn't the main project this past week. The main project was not Zenless Zone Zero. This was actually more like my reward for completing my actual project after, what? It's been like 3 weeks since this dropped. Alright, I'm just gonna peel it. Off. Shadow of the Erdtree. I got that shit done. And first thing I want to say is that From Software auto lock camera, the lock-on camera, that shit gotta go. It's either gotta go or they gotta update this shit, man. This was the last straw of me dealing with this stupid fucking camera, man. All the dragons, the dancing lion, Mesmer, all these guys that move so fucking fast across the screen and you can't keep up with them. Gaius, definitely looking at Gaius too, that fucking shithead. Even though after I got real pissed at him from hearing from my friend that he's really easy, and I completely washed him after that. Like, I mean, even after that, I still fucking hate Gaius's fight. That camera, man. That camera is absolutely abysmal for stuff like this. Can't we just like make it more flexible with how it works? You know? Can't we make that get that camera just being a little more flexible depending on the situation that you're currently in? Can't you just, when you lock onto a dragon, you can pan the camera can pan out, so that way you see the full body of the dragon? And maybe in that sense, like, you being smaller might help to be able to see where the dragon is and where they're attacking. Maybe it'll harm other people who, you know, might have some eyesight issues or awareness to their own characters if they're just too small on the screen. But I feel like that has to be the solution, right? Like, pan the camera out if you're gonna lock onto a dragon, so that way you're incentivized to actually lock onto a dragon and know where they're attacking from, so that you know where to place yourself within the battle. The only exception to this whole thing is probably my favorite dragon battle in all of Elden Ring, and that is Bale the Dread. He's the only guy that makes sense with this, because like the only way to really hit him is on his arms or his face. Like, I've seen clips of people trying to attack his legs, and they are surprisingly like invulnerable at certain parts. Like, he doesn't have a hitbox on some parts of his legs. I don't know how the fuck that happens. And you can't roll through them either. You can't do any. You can't get behind him normally. You have to circle all the way around him across his circumference. You know. This guy, he doesn't let you. He doesn't let you behind him. And if you are behind him at some point, he'll step back and he'll fucking swipe you with his tail. And then you're begging for your life. You know. But other than that, I mean, but like, you know, don't do that. Just go for his face, go for his arms, and you'll be able to get Bale the Dread, which is my favorite dragon fight, and probably my favorite giant boss fight in Elden Ring. There's a lot of that. Even in base game, there's quite a lot of like giant boss battles. You know, we're talking Fire Giant, Placidusax, Fortisax, all the dragons. I would consider Malekith there, but I feel like Malekith is closer to like base version of Dancing Lion with how ridiculous shit can get in that battle. But in all cases, the camera just does not work for these types of battles. The exception is Bale, because you're better off just being in front of his face anyway, which to that end, I appreciate the way he's designed much more than most of the other dragons in the game. But besides that, that is probably the most negative thing I have to say about this game. Could I say it's a negative that like you have to get through almost halfway through the game and through 2 major optional bosses to even access it? I could say that's a negative, but at the same time, I feel like if you go into this just trying to raw dog it, like you're like your first time playing Elden Ring, you're like, I'm gonna do the expansion content. Like, what are you doing? You are delusioning yourself. You are disillusioned to just how much conversation there was over the past 2 years of just how hard this game can be. You know, and I'm somebody who plays with the spirit summons. You know, I played through this DLC and I played through base game with spirit summons. But I still love this game. I love the game. I think some people, when they use it, they're using it as the crutch that they believe that they're that good at these types of games, and then they use it and then they're like, too easy. I really do believe that anybody who says that bosses are too easy with a Spirit Ash summon, save for a couple of instances where it's like reused bosses with like very similar movesets, or like they're just kind of ass as bosses. Aside from those, if you're telling me Godskin Duo was butt easy with a spirit summon, I think you're delusional. I don't know. I feel like those people are definitely the ones who are trying to hype themselves up for how good they are at the game, you know? And you can't say that anymore when you've got very casual audience streamers beating the game without any summons as well. And you can't use that as a crutch anymore, dude. You're just a pussy. And I'll fully admit I'm not that good at this game, so I'll say it, man. Even with the spirit summons, like Mesmer took me a couple of hours one day, and then on the next day I came back, I explored a bit, and then finally came back to him after having gone through a completely different build to actually beat him. Granted, the second time going to him did not take me nearly as long to actually get it down. It was probably during those first few hours of me learning him that helped me clutch it out at the end. But guess what? It was fucking Tish. Tish got the last hit on Mesmer with his dot damage. That's how Mesmer died when I beat him. It was Tish. If it weren't for Tish, I probably would still be trying to retry that fight over and over again, maybe up to this point. I don't know. Yeah, you guys are lying to yourselves who are using these spirit summons, saying that the game is too easy with them now. It's like, dude, then just play without them. Don't do it. If you felt dissatisfied losing to the last final boss of the DLC because you used the summon, then you probably shouldn't have used it in the first place, and you should have just grit your teeth and just kept going with it for however many hours you wanted to struggle through without a spirit summon. If you really feel that bad about using it but felt like the boss was that cheap to use it, I don't know, man, then maybe the game's not for you. Even if you've played all the other ones, this one just might not be for you. This one is pretty different from the other FromSoft games. They're pretty different from Dark Souls. There's a jump button. And there are essentially 3 different types of basic attacks you can do in the game, you know? In most of the previous Souls games, you know, you'd have 2 attack buttons. You'd have, you know, the side button that is generally used as a block button. Though I can see in some cases how you can like dual wield too in previous games. And then you had the special ability button, which is the Ash of War in this game. Where was I going with that? Maybe this game's not for you. Maybe the jump button ruined it for you. I learned how important the jump button is with this game because of the Furnace Golem. I think fighting the Furnace Golem enough has made me more confident in using it in all of the other base game bosses now. I'm thinking I'm gonna be jumping over Horror-Loo from now on with those BS stomps that he does in his fight. And it's mostly thanks to Furnace Golem and Rolana. Also, what a name, Rolana, huh? Jeez, crazy. Her great swords are awesome, but they just didn't fit my playstyle in the end. I used the Carrion Thrusting Shield with the whole Armor of Solitude set. So I was basically like Guts in his Berserker armor, but with a giant shield that I can poke people with. Even with that, I couldn't do the final boss on my own with that. I got 2 of my other friends to help me out with that, and then I proceeded to help them. I was able to tank it. I just could not do the damage to the last boss, unfortunately, for that fight. I mostly just took a lot of aggro, and I used the Sekiro Deflect crystal tier that you can use with your physic. Anyway, where do we go from here? I'm just gonna run through my pluses. Okay, I'm gonna run through all the positives that I felt is what makes this an important project, and why I feel like it was worth it in the end for me to get as far as I did with the game. I mean, I got to the Shadow Tree Blessing 19 and the Spirit Ash Blessing 9. I did not choose to try to quote-unquote 100% it. I thought by that point I had more than enough buffs to get through most of the content, save for the final boss where I needed help from my buddies. But let's get into it. So to me, this is probably the best designed open world to date, like even trumping base Elden Ring. There's a conversation to have over whether I like Shadow of the Erdtree more than base game Elden Ring, and we'll get into that in a little bit later. But just think of this open world of Shadow of the Erdtree as like a stack of pancakes, where following the trail of syrup through each layer will bring an entirely different flavor profile to this giant dessert meal you get of an expansion, on top of the buffet that you get from the base game. That's where my argument mostly lies. I am a pretty big dessert guy. I love my lava sundaes. I can't lie. The brownie sundaes, nice. A lava brownie sundae, oof. There's something about the trail of There's something about the trail of that stuff that comes out from the center of that brownie, that nice and warm brownie, a nice soft warm brownie. Something about the oozing out of it just adds something to it, and that's what this game is, man. That's what this expansion is. There are so many different paths you can take to the absurd amount of zones and locales they added into this game, where the size of the map is comparable to probably two zones in base game, but they've layered so many other places on top of each other, like a legacy dungeon within a legacy dungeon, where you go into a cave within that legacy dungeon and it leads into a completely different open zone that has a legacy dungeon in it anyway. Like, this is absurd. I can't tell you how many times I made a left on one turn, and instead of going straight that direction, I made a different turn at some point, and then I got completely lost as to where I wanted to go in the first place. And there was a lot of stuff that happened early in the expansion that I would completely miss because I would keep doing that. Like, it was even more so than from the base game. In the base game, you could kind of ride a certain direction on the map and you'll get someplace, and then you could find that trail and keep going that way, and you'll find something else if you just kept going in that direction. You can keep finding things going in one direction. I feel like there were so many deviations on the road and the paths to here, and so many times where the world map itself lies to you. Case in point, the tower settlement Belurat. On the eastern side of Belurat, it's a completely white looking zone that looks like it's just plain like mass land that is like, okay, this is probably castle themed area, so we got to find out how to get to this open side court area at some point. And then it took me until I was on my way towards the final boss that I found that there was a little side path I could take that led me into a poison swamp. Just a poison swamp in the tower settlement. And when I looked on my map, guess where I was? I was on the eastern side of Belurat. These motherfuckers lied to you. They were hiding a poison swamp underneath that landmass on the world map just to fucking mess with you, dude. It is absolutely insane the lengths that these guys went to just completely mess with your head with just how deep and layered a lot of the world design is in this place. And it's not nearly as big, it's not nearly as expansive as base game, right? You're not going up a mountaintop, and you're not going off to the side where there's like a completely separate road that leads into a giant red swamp zone with rot and fucking disgusting things everywhere. You don't get that. What you get is you walk into a legacy dungeon, and then if you take the ladder down here and you roll into this wall, turns out the wall was just an illusionary wall. You go down that wall thinking, I'm gonna find some hidden loot. No, it's just the next zone. It's the zone that's outside of this legacy dungeon. And then if you explore that zone, maybe you'll come across some dudes that are not that very nice to look at. Maybe you'll come across some shadow tree fragments. But while you're in there, you're gonna come across yet another like mini legacy dungeon almost. I'm gonna argue against it being a legacy dungeon. That was more like a typical sort of dungeon, like a smaller size dungeon. It's what the fuck? What is this? What is going on with this? If they had designed the base game like this, I think Elden Ring base game would have been much more divisive of a game. That's how I feel. I think the base game is designed the way that it is to actually cater to the casual audience, which included me, to get to be sold on the game and try it out. And I got hooked. And I didn't get hooked on the combat. I got hooked on the world design. I got hooked on just how intricate dungeons can be. Like, if you're talking like an immersive, interesting open world to explore and be rewarded for exploring, along with dungeon crawling aspects that just reek of old school, like, that's my shit right there, dude. Like, that's just my shit, you know? Another comparative, I guess, in modern times would be Lunacid. Lunacid has some areas that are kind of like that, you know, but it's much more old school, old-fashioned in that you load into different zones, but they're all usually pretty big and expansive, and some of them have dungeons within their already expansive areas. But let me not get sidetracked too hard on that, because another thing I want to talk about are all the weapon types that they introduced into here. And while I may not have had personal experience with each and every new weapon type in the game, I would say for the ones that I did try out, all of them felt good to use, and all of them felt viable. They all felt viable to me in some form or aspect of how you can approach the content in here. They're not all, there's not one like super OP build aside from pre-patch Thunder perfume bottle, right? Other than that, like, there wasn't really anything that completely, like, entirely broke the game to an extent. Like, you had to kind of work to get things to break as intended with a specific build, most cases, with like base game. And even with this one too, there are some weapon types that like you have to definitely make a specific build to make this weapon work. But from what I've seen, from what I've experienced myself, and from what I've seen online, I mean, it feels like none of these new weapon types are misses, right? That's the impression I'm getting. None of them are misses. I'm not sure about the crossbows and the bows yet. I know there's a repeater one. I don't know if that one is actually like viable to some extent. In most cases, in base game, bows and crossbows and those ranged weapons are just kind of ass. Like, they're just not fun to use either, because they don't have anything like what Neo has with like actual critical hits on people's heads or weak spots, you know? In a game like that, when you hit a spot like that with a ranged weapon, you see how much damage you can do with that, and you're like, oh shit, okay, alright, this is pretty good. This is pretty good for certain situations. In this game, granted, you can get crit damage, but like, it's not exacerbated like how it is in something like Neo with how much damage you do off a crit, you know? Getting a headshot in Elden Ring does not feel nearly as good as getting a headshot in other action games like that. But aside from that, I mean, it just seems like all the weapons that they've introduced are pretty crazy, and they're pretty good too. I mean, I love my thrusting shield. The dual wielding great swords from Rolana are pretty great too. I've seen the great sword by itself, both one-handed and two-handed, and it looks great. We'll leave it at that. I smacked my mic. God damn it! Last time I booped my nose, and now I'm smacking my mic. What am I doing? Most of the lore that you'll come to contact with will have connections to characters that were mentioned in passing, mostly within the base game. There are still some characters that are left out that we don't really get addressed here, but I think it's because they would be out of context for what the DLC explores. The sort of the stories and the lore and the characters that you will interact with are fully immersed within the DLC itself, and anyone who's not involved, I feel like they probably wouldn't be able to fit in anyway. You know, people talk about, oh, what happened to Godwin? Like, what do you mean what happened to Godwin? He's like omnipresent. He's omnipresent anyway. So like, what could they possibly do with that? Why would he have anything to do with Mikola at this point? At this point in time, he would have nothing to do with Mikola. So why bother bringing him in? Another thing, most of the major bosses within the critical path to actually completing the game, they're hard, but they are manageable in that you can learn the strategies to deal with them, how to dodge their attacks. With Mesmer, I basically all I did, I learned his combos, and then I just always rolled into him. I was always up in his face, smacking him whenever I can. That was my strategy. You do not want to keep away from Mesmer. And I would probably say the same about the final boss, except for the fact that a good chunk of his damage can be negated pretty well with enough holy resistance. And you can get that. There are items and there are flasks and there are, you know, equipment that you can use within the Shadow of the Erdtree that will help you mitigate holy damage. And it helped in my case, even in co-op. He still never did enough damage to me with his giant explosion. And to me, I found that to be absolutely absurd. How often I would get hit by that, and just how little damage it would actually do. It was a giant holy explosion, and he only did like a quarter of my health. I was expecting like 50%, if I'm being honest. I can still go at it with him right now. I don't need to be healing right now. I could go up to his face, hit him with a thrusting attack, and then just pray with my Sekiro blocking. You know, but everyone else too, they're manageable too. Romina, she's manageable. Mesmer, he's manageable. The Dancing Lion is, I don't think I fully learned his fight, but he was manageable as a thrusting shield user. I'll leave it at that. He's manageable with that. And then yeah, the new music. To get on to a next topic, the new music in it is just about as good as base game. People are saying that the new music is better than base game. I'm inclined to disagree with that. I'm more inclined to agree that it's at the same level as base game, and that is not a knock to that. It's not a knock to the base game, and it's not a knock on the DLC in itself either. If you have them both on par, then you're just getting really good music across the board from this game. Like, whether you're playing base game or whether you're playing the DLC, it's good music all around. It's great. And it fits, all the themes, they fit real well with whoever you're fighting, you know? There's some real grotesque themes and characters that you'll come across, and the music just fits the mood with that when you're fighting them. The new leveling system that is exclusive to the Land of Shadows helps make it viable, so that like there's a wide level range that you can actually enter the DLC in with and not have too much of issues with, aside from actually taking hits from enemies. Like, I think everybody's just gonna take a bunch of damage until you get enough tree blessings to be able to tank way more hits in the base game, in the DLC rather, not the base game. But like, I've seen a wide range of people be able to do stuff in the DLC. Like, people who come in at level 80 and still be able to manage their time in it. I came in at level 120, which they said was the bare minimum that you should be at to get there, and I never felt like I was like being reprimanded or like being beaten down because I came in at such a quote-unquote low level for the DLC. Like, everybody got their ass handed to them, no matter what level you were at that point in the game when you first showed up. Those tree blessings make a big difference. People say that exploring for them is a pain in the ass, but then like, how were you experiencing the base game? Were you using guides the whole time? Were you just doing the bare minimum? Were you just being a pussy? You pussy? I don't know. That's for you to decide. The incentive here is to explore a bunch to get these fragments for both your Shadow Tree and your Spirit Ash blessings. So I don't know. I don't think that's a valid criticism personally. If you're not interacting with the game that it wants you to interact it with. If you're not interacting with the game in the way that it's intending you to interact with it, which is to go out and explore, find stuff, find quests, find items, find the blessings. If you're not doing that, then you're just making it harder on yourself, and there's no real reason to be whining about it, because then what you're saying is you just don't like the way the game is designed, which it could inherently be argued that you just don't like the game. But then you're going to argue that you do like the game, you just don't like X, Y, Z. Well, that's how the game is designed. That's how they designed the game. They purposely designed it in this way. And if you don't like the way that it's designed, how can you say you still like the game? What the fuck, dude? Like, seriously? No, I'm not going down with this. I'm not going down with your ship, dude. Fuck off. There's no bloat within the side dungeons that are in here. There's only 3 catacombs, 3 new forges, 3 new, I think the jails are new, 3 new jails, and then I forgot what else is here. Catacombs, forges, jails, and each of them, there's only about 3 of them. There are 4 nameless mausoleums, which have like which have like unique NPC boss fights with people who are, I think most of them are supposed to be tarnished as well that you fight. They're like ghostly apparitions of previous tarnished that have shown up there. That's my impression. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but they just fight like you're fighting somebody in PvP, where each of them all get one heal, sort of like Gideon and people in base game. There's those. There's the side dungeons, and none of them are bloated, really. In fact, I would say I really like the way the catacombs are designed in this one now, especially over the base game. And we're gonna get deeper into this, but let's just start here. Let's start here nice and easy, because I think most people will find it hard to disagree that like the catacombs are way more intricately designed and complex in the DLC than they were in base game. Most base game catacombs were kind of just like hallways that led into traps that led into golems or gargoyles, sorry, that led into gargoyles. Those little stone fuckers that led into a lever. You hit the lever and then you go back to where you started, and then it's a boss. These are like multi-leveled, multi-layered dungeons. Like, I'm pretty sure all of them are at least 3 levels, like 3 levels in terms of like depth, where you're gonna go down at least 2 sets of elevators to even get to the boss. And even then, after every elevator you hit, when you reach lower parts of the catacomb, you'll reach a Stake of Marika. And the Stake of Marika in this case is actually a checkpoint. It's a checkpoint in the dungeon. Like, that's so cool. They did not do that at all in the base game. The closest thing was having a stake in front of the boss room, you know, which you had to go through the entirety of the catacomb to be able to hit the lever and then come back to the start to even, you know, be able to reach there. But in most cases in those, you're just running your way through it in one shot in most cases to be able to get to the lever and then, you know, run back to be able to fight the boss, you know. There's usually a backtracking process that occurs, or you just kill yourself so that you can just start at the beginning again. In this, you don't do that, because each level of the catacombs has different objectives and has different challenges to overcome and different rooms to interact with, so that when you get to the elevator that leads into the next level below, there's a Stake of Marika there that's basically to tell you, like, all right, this is it. This is where this is your starting point from here on out in this catacombs. You know, for this level of the catacombs, this is where you start now. And then once you get past there and you go to the next elevator, there it is. You fucking see the yellow mist. This is the boss. And guess what's there waiting for you? A Stake of Marika. I just think that's ingenious. They needed to do more of this in the base game. I'm kind of hoping that if they ever do an Elden Ring again, that they just limit the scope that they're wanting to do with it, and instead focus on the intricacies that this DLC does. Because this feels more at home with, I think, what most people were expecting in terms of like level design and world design from like the previous games. And I personally really like it. That's probably my favorite part about these games, is the way that the levels are designed and the way that the world is designed as well. This game that is like actually fully open world, where the only loading screens you deal with are fast traveling or reaching the round table hold. That's pretty sick. I don't know. To me, that's pretty sick. Man, what else do I want to get into? I guess the last thing I'll say as we close this out, this needs to get edited down because Miguel came into the room and I started joking around with him. And so he knew I wasn't being too serious about making this shit. And it's fucking hot and humid in my room because I have the AC off because I don't want the mic picking up all that noise. Here's what I want to say. I love base Elden Ring for a good chunk of the reasons why I love Shadow of the Erdtree. Though I would say there is more for me personally to love about Shadow of the Erdtree than base game. But I started to look at the open world design of Elden Ring in a much more negative light after playing this DLC, because while the serenity of traveling across something like the shallow Liurnia Lake creates this sort of ambiance that you can't find anywhere else in base game, if you have to go on a trek through there with the potential to miss however many sites of grace there are in that area, to have to constantly backtrack through that can be potentially tiring after a while. And it happened to me a couple times, because on my, new character or new game plus, I'd completely forget where the hell some of the sites of graces were in that area, and I'd have to just make my way around that area and find them myself, because I knew I would probably be running back and forth to the sparse amount of dungeons and side areas to explore in that area itself. It is a sight to behold the first time you're there in Liurnia Lake. It is still one of the prettiest sights ever, right? Because you're just at that point before Alta's Plateau, and you have no clue that you're even gonna get there at this point. You've just passed through Stormvale Castle, so you can look back and you can see all of Limgrave from where you just came from. You can look across and you can see the small inklings of Caelid and be absolutely disturbed or perturbed by it. Like, it's a perfect area. I feel like that is a perfect ambiance area. It is quintessential to the way that base Elden Ring is designed. But I think that's part of my issue with it right now, is that there is a lot more just kind of running across a sparse field to a certain direction for like a minute or two to find something or fight something that is interesting, as opposed to the way Shadow of the Erdtree works, where like off the jump, dude, you hit the side of grace and then you walk up a bit and then you find the guy with the dual backhand blades, and he's fucking your shit up. And then if you look to the left, there's the mausoleum, the first mausoleum. And if you go to the right, there's the church with the guy with the shield and the giant hammer. And then even on that side in the woods, there's the dude with the beast claws, the fucking Wolverine motherfucker. Dude. Like, everywhere you look, it's just like these different unique scenarios that are occurring. And it's all within the context of an open world. Except it doesn't feel like an open world with Shadow of the Erdtree. It doesn't feel like things are placed in there just to be sparse and big and make it feel grandiose. The grandiose part of Shadow of the Erdtree is just how fucking dense all the areas are, and how they stack on top of each other in such a logical way, to like discovering the cave that you need to get to the Cerulean coast is mind-boggling, really. Like, people say, like, I don't get how people could even get to this place in the first place. My friends, you gotta do I got some homework to do on some old school games, man. Fucking, you ever heard of Legend of Zelda? I feel like that's gonna be taken out of context and turned into a meme. Yeah. Do some homework. And play some old school dungeon crawlers. Play some of those NES games that are so obtuse, and you start to wonder, how did people figure this out? And I mean, more often than not, it was because there are also guides, and the instruction manuals also told you a lot of stuff, But if you didn't have that stuff, it was word of mouth, and it was kind of gamer sense. Game sense, not gamer sense. Mostly game sense. After you've played enough of these sorts of games, you start to understand the methodology and philosophy behind the way things are designed, and the way things are implemented, and the way that they work in these games. And Shadow of the Erdtree is a prime example of that, where the open world design is integrated almost seamlessly into the way legacy dungeons work, the way the smaller side dungeons work, the way NPC interactions work, all that stuff. With that, I say, yeah, I like Shadow of the Erdtree more than base Elden Ring. That is to say, though, you definitely need to play base Elden Ring first before you get yourself involved in this mindfuck of the Shadow of the Erdtree. That's about all I got. that's what I got done. Next week, do I recap Unicorn Overlord next week? Do I talk shit about First Descendant? Or do I mention that most fighting games, even in this era, with how good they are, with how fun they are low-key kind of scams? I don't know. This is gonna get edited down. Not this part, just the part with Miguel and me walking away to get water. Well, now I'm gonna edit this out because now I'm just talking shit.